Hi, and welcome to the She Geeks Out podcast, where we geek out about workplace inclusion and talk with brilliant humans doing great work, making the world a better and brighter place. I am Rachel.
And I am Felicia.
Yay!
We are super thrilled today to welcome the brilliant and insightful Amber Cabral to the podcast. So Amber is a sought-after speaker, author, inclusion strategist, and she's also now the host of a brand new podcast called Humaning Well. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk about really doing a deep dive into what does it actually mean to human well? How do we show up for ourselves so we can really fully show up for others? How do we process grief? And how do we continue doing the work of being human in the workplace? So Amber brings her signature warmth and wisdom to this conversation. We get into some therapy and really just get into how do we make space for the messy, necessary, and deeply personal work of growth. So we really can't wait for you to listen. But
You're going to have to wait.
Get into that, you will have to wait.
Well, actually, or you just forward through this part.
We can't wait, but you'll have to wait. We need to get into it. As always, let's do it.
Yeah. I'm like,
on?
Who wants to start?
I know. What's going on? Where to start? How to start?
Yeah, I mean, Amber, like you said in the intro, I mean, she was just such a font of wisdom. And, I was thinking a lot about our conversation and how our cups need to be full before we can fill others, which we'll definitely get into in the interview, which I think was just so wise. And we want to talk a little bit about what does that actually mean for us and for you in the workplace? Like, how can we make sure that our cups aren't empty when we are also trying to live in this world that we are living in? So, Felicia, what are some of your ways?
Let me count them. I mean, look, the reality is it's hard. It is really hard. And I know for some of you, you're like, oh, whatever, like go take a nap or go touch grass or whatever. But it is actually very challenging, especially for folks who are in, whatever you want to call it, like equity work, social justice work, practitioners, DEI work, if you're still calling it that, whatever you're doing. It could even be HR, right? Or you could be just not just
or anything.
A people manager, like you're just out there in the world trying to.
I gotta say, if you're just showing up for a paycheck, it's gonna be hard.
Yeah, but I think especially for folks who are in sort of like the business, quote unquote, of supporting other people, it is very difficult sometimes to navigate how much do you give of yourself to somebody else, and then how much do you reserve for yourself? Because that metaphor of pouring from an empty cup, it's one we use a lot in our space too, where basically the idea is like, if you're always pouring out, at a certain point, you're going to go dry. So you need to take pauses, you need to take breaks, you need to take vacations or rests or whatever it's going to be for you to refill that cup or jug or pitcher, whatever you want to call it, so that you can still pour out for other people. And depending on your personality and the work and what's going on, that can be really challenging because sometimes there is a really great need. And so it's hard sometimes to say, hey, hold up, I got to not help somebody, or I can't do this right now because I need to focus on myself. If you consider yourself a helper, that's a really, really tricky thing to navigate.
Yeah.
And I know, Rachel, you're someone I love the way you're like such a fixer and you always want to come to the solution. And, and sometimes it's like the solution is to not go to the solution yet because we got to do our own work first. And so Amber talks a lot about that, but it's just such a pertinent thing to come back to, I think, in these days, because the reality is the world is worlding and it's really, really easy to get burned out. It's almost impossible not to.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talked about for anyone who's working in the way we have traditionally been told to work, which is that sort of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, or maybe even it's Monday through Thursday now. If you have a 4-day work week, that's great. But, we talk a lot about well, what does that actually mean to get the stuff done? Does that mean that we have to show up between the hours of 9 and 5? How much of our time is dedicated to being in meetings versus actually getting stuff done? I think there's a lot of questions around what is it that we are trying to accomplish? What are the goals? How are we doing it? Does it make sense what we're doing? And how can we do it in a way that maybe is a little bit out of the box from the traditional ways of thinking? So for example, we talk about this. So Felicia and I are on different coasts. So, and it actually works out. what? I'm in California, Felicia's in Massachusetts, and, it actually works out really well because I'm a super morning person and Felicia's more of
Not.
a not morning person. And so that does work out well, for us to overlap in time, but a lot of the work that we do is asynchronous, and sometimes I have a really tough time focusing on, like, a Tuesday. So but I gotta get some stuff done. So, you know what? I find that I have more mental bandwidth energy on Sunday afternoons. So I take some time on Sunday afternoon and I get some stuff done. It makes me feel like I'm good for getting into the week. And guess what? It's fine. 'Cause nobody's gonna freak out about it.
Well,
So
you're your own boss, so it's definitely
oh,
fine, but
it is kinda nice that way.
yeah, but I mean, I think that's a good point, and especially, we're as you said, like, we're on opposite coasts, we don't go in office, we work from home. I think in today's workforce environment, it's a really interesting shift because we saw this big shift, a few years back of go hybrid, go virtual. Now we're seeing a really intense push for the return to office across the board in pretty much like a lot of different industries. And especially in the federal space, and,
Mhm.
it's not always well thought out, but I was just thinking about it this morning because I had a bit of a slower morning, and I just was sort of, like, mentally telling myself, like, "Oh, why do you always do this?" Like, you get up,
Mm.
and then you don't get to work right away, like, "What's wrong with you?" And then I was thinking about it some more, and I was like, when I went to the office pre-inclusion gigs, or even when it was, when we had our co-working space before the pandemic, when I used to commute in and if I go to the office, there was so much time that wasn't dedicated to just straight up working. So you go in, depending on the weather, there would be maybe like shedding of jackets and boots or whatever, freshening up in the bathroom, getting morning coffee, talking with people. Sometimes I'd be eating breakfast, I'd scroll the news, I'd chat with folks. There was so much just like little bits that add up where I wasn't tapping away like a robot. And, going to lunch, we'd leave the space that we were in. I don't leave my house so much these days. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but, like, I'd leave, I'd go get salad, I'd come back, I'd take a walk, I'd go around, I'd meet people. There was just all of these moments that were built in that added to this idea of work, but wasn't actually translatable to, "Oh, I can track this hour as I did this," or "I accomplished this project," or whatever it is. And I think working from home, what I've learned is that you're at least I'll say for me and you, I think, we are so much more productive working from home than we ever were going into an office because,
Yeah.
depending on whatever time it is, but like I know, like you said, you're such an early bird. You wake up and you're like, you're in it and you're working and you're doing it. And then, I got to tell myself, you got to go downstairs and like go take a bathroom break. And I'm like tapping away. And you know me, I love my data and I love tracking my hours just for me personally because I want to know what do I spend my time on. And the amount of time that I actually work is so much higher than when I used to be in person. So I think that's another aspect of it too, where, we got these shifting sort of norms and requests and demands on our time. And we have to remember that, especially for those of us who've been working virtually, we're already operating for a lot of us at a much higher level than we were even, a few years back. So
What I'm hearing is that you need to work less.
I know, right?
That's that's
I'm hearing that too, actually.
Yeah, I think it's
Well,
time to get out and touch grass.
I will say, given that we do work on opposite coasts, part of my working approach is weather related. So when it is cold and icy and snowy, I really literally do not leave the house. Now it's started to warm up a little bit, although I think this is what we call here in Massachusetts false spring because
Yeah.
we are supposed to get some snow tonight, sadly. But it's starting to get there. We're seeing glimpses of it. And the other thing that I do, and I think, it's something that you sort of take as optional because you live in a very different environment than I do. But once it hits, warm weather in my area, I do tend to try to take 3-day weekends because I really want to take advantage of the warm weather while it's here. And so to your point, maybe my Monday to Friday is a Tuesday to Friday or Monday to Thursday, and then really just carving out that time so that I don't feel guilty about not working or getting online late or whatever it might be. So,
Yeah, and it's getting the work done, and it's different from busy work too. I think that that's really easy to, it's the thought work, it's the hard stuff, and finding the time to really do that it takes a lot. You can't do that on an empty cup, you know?
no, no. I mean, back in well, so anyone who knows anything about how our industry has evolved over the last few years knows that there was a huge demand in 2020, obviously, and then, into 2021. And I got super burnt out and I would just wake up and like start crying because I didn't want to go to work and I was totally empty with my cup. So I had to take time and actually build it in and allow myself that space to refill. But I do think that there's, another layer to all this, right? Because this is just sort of like, where are we working? Are we commuting? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? But then it's also, there are some major serious, shit that's happening going on right now. And that's super distracting. And so no matter what work environment you're working in, we also have to realize that it's super easy to get distracted. And I don't want to position that as like a bad thing because it just speaks to, as we'll talk about with Amber, the fact that we're humans and we're not robots. We shouldn't just get up and sign on our computer or go to work and tippity tap all day and shut it down. Like we are going to be impacted by what's happening. And if we weren't, honestly, that would be really disturbing. So, like that's another part of it too. And I know you and I have talked a lot about that and we struggle with it, I guess. I don't know for you, Rachel, but like for me on a daily basis, basically.
Well, and I know that this is getting long, but I do want to just add that there is a reason why people feel like we need to be super productive and tippity tap away and be like robots. It's why people are working toward having robots do all the work.
Yeah, and
So,
we don't like that.
yeah, I mean, or maybe that is going to be good, right? And then it frees up humans to do things that don't require us to act like
Well,
robots. It depends on all
mhm,
how like the economic systems shake out in this whatever
true.
new world order is going to be. And I will say for those of you who are interested in this topic, I think we will be talking about that. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are talking about the future of work and AI and how that impacts humans, right? And especially and work. And so we are giving that a lot of thought because that absolutely influences this work too. Is like maybe we will have time for our cups to be full, and so that we can focus on things that are going to be more meaningful and more creative. I don't know. I'll put that energy out there. We'll work alongside our robot buddies, and it's gonna be great.
As long as the robots aren't creating art, music, and culture, I'm here for it. Let them do the
Yeah.
the boring stuff. Let
Well, or
them,
maybe they will
you
be,
know
right? But like that, I mean, look, to be honest, I mean, a lot of the music that, not to sound like an old, but a lot of the music with all the auto tuning and everything is heading in that direction anyway. But there is still a lot of art and music that is created that is human, more human focused. So I think there'll probably be space for both. So let the robots create their art. We'll create ours. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be
as long as
great.
we can still create too. That's my main point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think
Well,
I
yeah,
think we have to. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Robots or not, we'll talk more about this in the
Yeah.
upcoming episodes for sure. So if you're like, I want to hear more, don't worry, we got
We
more for
got
you.
you.
But we need to get to Amber, so let's get into it. So
Yeah. Well, welcome to the show, Amber. Well, hello, Amber. Welcome to the podcast. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay. So we have so much to dig into.
Yeah.
There are so many ways that we can get this party started. So
Mhm.
I think that one of the best ways to maybe get it started is to talk a little bit about sort of what you shared recently on some of your channels. And so,
Mhm.
as we all know, the world
Mhm.
has been giving us a lot of
Mm.
wild energy over the past X number of, you can go back however far you feel,
Yeah.
and also for you personally. And you shared that you had some personal loss and you talked about the messiness of grief. We'd just love to hear how you come to understand that the ways that we typically try to find ways to cope as a way to process grief aren't particularly helpful. If you can talk through
Oof.
that.
Yeah. You made that question sound so beautiful, and it is such a messy, messy, messy question. Yeah. So I when I lost my father, at the beginning of 2023. So first of all, the losing of my father was complicated because my father actually, I now know that he passed in December of 2022, but he was not found until 2023. So, like, it was
Oh
the
my
end of the
goodness.
year. Right. So, there was this like window of time that he was just there. Right. And his landlady, who I'm still in touch with, Becky's amazing. She, made sure that the police got in touch with me and all of that. So, I found out on the 5th of January, but I think he actually passed closer to right around a couple days after Christmas. And so just that processing alone is like, okay, I lost my dad here, but I actually lost him here. But like, so there is something very strange that we do with dates. And so I remember even just coming from getting the information and the information alone feeling really complicated. And then you add in the feelings of losing a person. And so we watch TV. So you see grieving. You think you are doing it right because, you cry or you don't, or you're to yourself, or people are showing up and they're feeding you things or whatever, people are trying to get you out the house. Like, I thought I was doing it, but like, I could not contain grief the way that I thought I could. Like, you know, 10 days of bereavement, thank goodness I didn't have a real job because I would never have, that would have not remotely have come close. And so I was in this perpetual state of like, okay, I'm okay. I can do what I need to do and I can work and I'm fine. And then like the smallest disappointment would send me into like this complete unraveling of tears. And so, yeah, I at some point had to own that I needed to just surrender. Like, I gotta let the grief do its thing. And it has taken me on what I think is a really beautiful journey at this point, now that it is 2025. But again, I lost my dad at technically the end of 22. This has been a ride. And so, I have unraveled in front of clients. I have, I cried through a TED talk that I fortunately was able to do a year later. But like, there was a lot of like really difficult moments in that. And the thing that I feel like I walked away with is that we do not make room for our humanness. We make decisions about the way we should be. And we try to choose those things as we are on the journey, whether that's grief, whether that's job loss, whether that's having a child, whether that's, I also had a hysterectomy, so surgery. Like, there was a lot of things that I felt like these are just notches on the life belt. And these are the ways that I navigate them. And my humanity was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And by the way, you're not taking care of yourself. And also you're not sleeping. And also, and I was just like, what is this? And so, yeah, that's the answer for that is I'm in a really great place now. It is a very unpredictable place, but losing my father and trying to grieve in the way that the world told me I was supposed to really put me in a position to learn a lot of really valuable lessons about the way life is supposed to be lived. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I know it's what you said, I think really is so true. It's like the humanness of it and the humanity of
Mhm.
it. And a lot of times we feel like we have to show up in certain ways. So we lose sight of the
Yeah.
humanity because we're trying so hard to be something. And I don't
Yes.
know if this is also just a byproduct of sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, like internet culture or like, TikTok influencer culture where we always see ourselves in the
Yeah.
screen. And so there's this sort of extra awareness of what are we looking like or what are
Yeah.
we saying? How are we showing up? So I just really appreciate that compulsion, it sounds like, of just getting back to the basics
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering too, because you kind of mentioned, like there's obviously a million different ways to
Yeah.
process and deal with grief. And it probably is an evolution as well. And, I know for people, especially those who've lost close ones and loved ones, it's not something that you sort of like get over at a certain point and then you move on
Mm.
with your life. You just learn how to live with it. But a lot of times whether we're dealing with loss or anxiety, stress, whatever that might be, a lot of us are like, okay, what's the quick fix? Like, how do I just make myself feel better right now? It could be short-term stuff like go take a walk, using a meditation app, taking a nap. But there's also that balance between there's deeper work that's needed to really
Mhm.
grow, heal, understand what's going on. And I'm just curious how that balance has looked like or what's that process has felt like for you in this past couple
Yeah.
years.
It's been interesting. Like, I think like I said, the biggest lesson that I feel like I got was to surrender. And surrendering is ugly and messy and like inconvenient and like you don't know when it's going to happen to you. Now, the good thing is that most people are forgiving and can give you grace. The tricky thing about grief, though, is that because to your point, we have these containers around it that we're given from society or TikTok or, whatever social media engagement looks like for us. People don't always know that it's grief that's doing it. So I had this moment with a client I had had for years and years. Like, I'm sure that I am still somewhere in their like stuff because I worked with them forever. And we had a moment. I was on a call with them doing a training with some of their senior leaders. It was a second part to that training. The leaders had some homework that they were supposed to do and they just like weren't doing it. And I was like, what is up? Like, I know y'all. And they were like giving me, I mean, for lack of a better answer, like BS answers. Like, this is not real. Like, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing inclusion right. Someone should come like watch me. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like. And so as I was kind of listening to them, there was just this like overwhelming disappointment. And I was at work. You know what I mean? Like, I was at work. It was not convenient. It was not, I did not see that coming. And, next thing I know, I was in tears and I'm trying to articulate, like, I know you. I know this organization. I know the work that I've done here. I know how y'all show up. I want real answers for why you are not doing what you can do. I've taught you these things. We've done these things before. And what that was, yes, me saying, I'm not seeing the level of accountability here that I am used to. It was also me being like, why isn't anything working? Nothing's working. Nothing's working. I know that this should be working. I did it myself. It should be working. And at a time when you're grieving, that's what you want the most, is you're just like, I just want things to work. I want things to be familiar and accessible and all of that. You got to kind of let all that go, though. It is literally, for me, it's been a major unraveling and a need to just fall apart to get to the place of understanding, oh, I have really been neglecting my health. I have absolutely been making myself sick by doing this and that. I shaved my head for a reason. It took me years to get to the decision to do it. But like, after all of that, after what the grief did to me and what it forced me to face, I was able to admit the ways that I wasn't doing what I needed. So like, of course you did the work. Of course it should be working, but it's not because you haven't done what you need to do for you. And we underestimate that part, that like, you can put all the pieces on the walls. You can make it all look beautiful and fantastic. If you are the one walking around in it and you haven't done the work you need to do on you, very soon the unraveling will begin. You will be shocked and appalled and confused and in tears, and it will still be grief, but it will also be you having to have the reckoning of like, oh, yo, I'm not doing what I need to do for me. And some of us don't get to that, but like, that's the thing that I got to that changed all of it. I mean, especially in a world where like DEI was suddenly like unraveling. I'm like, okay, God, like seriously, you're just gonna like shut my whole career down? You know what I mean? Like, what's up? And that's not obviously just about me, but it was a part of the things that I had to face around like how I was propping things up while I was still not okay.
Wow, there's so much that I have like 14,000 thoughts in my head as you're talking through all of this, because it's, we're talking about how you're showing up for yourself while you're also showing up for other people, and you're trying to help them go through their journey while you're trying to go through your journey. And then meanwhile, as you pointed out, like there's this backlash that, yes, of course, we've seen it obviously intensify this year. But
Yeah.
as we both have, as all three of us know, because we've been in this space, there's been a backlash for a
Yeah,
couple of years now.
for
And
sure.
so we're experiencing that. And so it's like, okay, how do you actually, how much of this is therapy?
Yeah.
Where people are actually like experiencing their emotions for the first time,
Yeah.
especially in this like white supremacist patriarchal culture that does not
Ooh.
appreciate any sort of like emotion being
Correct.
shown unless it's a particular emotion,
Right.
which is anger in a particular way presented
Correct.
by a particular person.
Yep.
So how it's like so much to unpack.
It is.
And I want to sort of get to this next question that we had, which is around, you talked a little bit about how you sort of came to this realization that a lot of the folks that maybe are doing this work to support it were doing it with in a way that sort of produced some sort of guilt or shame.
Yes.
And I want to talk a little bit about that. We talk a lot about that as like no guilt, no shame, nobody's perfect. We're all trying to figure it
Nope.
out, but there was a lot of that, right? That people were holding into this, and then they're like, I feel so guilty. Wait, it's not working. Okay, fine. I'm going to just lash out. And that's
Yep.
where we are today.
Yeah.
So now you're taking this kind of new approach.
Yeah.
This feeling. And so I would love for you to just talk about this approach of, which I think I'm going to just be on. I'm sure that you have always had this approach of genuine empathy, and connection.
I'm better at it now. My boyfriend, if he were here, he would laugh at you. Like, empathy? Her? That is not a real thing. So this is such a great question. So I want to go back to your point about the guilt thing. It's not popular to say, but a lot of people have been riding the guilt. A lot of people have. Folks felt we were stuck in the house. We were isolated. We were forced to do nothing but watch whatever the TV gave us. And it was not a whole lot. It was the COVID numbers and how sad that was around the world. And it was whatever piece of news that your local broadcast could get a hold of. And then George Floyd happened and we all had that. And that was a horrible, horrifying, terrible piece of news, but we all experienced it. And we experienced it at a time where our idea and connection to humanity was so prickly, right? We were so concerned about ourselves and our identities and just like what humanness meant. And so people wrote that. Now, I want to be clear, for a very short time, to get people's attention, guilt makes sense. When people feel it, you do want to go, hey, you feel that thing? Let's figure out what we can do about that, right? But what you don't want to do is try to keep people in that space because it is exhausting and people will hit a point where they are burnt out, they are over it, and they will destroy whatever came from it. And that is where we are now. And so there are a lot of folks who jumped into the game that took advantage of it, right? And didn't necessarily give people the resources that they needed to know how to navigate difference, which is really what equity work should have been focused on. I was definitely trying to do the work that way, but at some point it all was DEI, So, okay, great. Amber does DEI. The way I do it, the box and frame that I came with was of little consequence. It was the work I did. So obviously when the backlash comes, I am swept up in it, And so it's been an interesting thing to kind of witness, because, it's tough to admit where you went wrong, but that was wrong. And I am hoping, as I look back to kind of get to the second part of your question, when I look back and I evaluated, like, where is the backlash? Why are people so angry? What is so frustrating about this? Like, what we really want is for people to be like happy and like feel a sense of connectedness and like understand the value that they have. And also that others have that too. We want people to be better at humaning. Boom, that was what it was. I was like, oh, that's it. We are humaning so badly. And it was about the time that I was working on my TED Talk. And I kept saying that, I wanted my TED Talk to be about allyship, but I didn't want to say the word. And so Ted was like, wait, what? And so like we go on this journey and, my talk ends up unfolding exactly that way. I don't actually even say the word until the very end of the talk, because what I wanted was people to understand that like, we need tools to be with each other. We need tools to know how to like listen to something that makes us uncomfortable and sit with that and be like, ooh, I don't like that. And not rage out, but instead be like, hey, can you help me understand how you got to that perspective? Because I think there may be something in there that isn't quite right. Like we need tools to be able to say, yo, I don't think this is fair because I understand the implications of that for everybody, not just, oh, I mean, that's unfortunate that that's happening to those people over there, which is a lot of what we've done. And so the work that I am doing now, I'm calling humaning well, but it has equity at the center, but it is asking us to be equitable with us first. Like, are you good? Like, we're asking people to run out here and be allies to people, but like, have you been an ally for you? Have you been empathetic for you? I wasn't. I beat myself up every day. I couldn't get out the bed after my dad died and do my job. You know what I mean? So like we are asking depleted humans who we have made feel guilty for years to show up well. It's like unreasonable. Like, be for real. Like, people are burnt out. And so, of course, folks are, we're on the burnout ride. We're on the overwhelmed ride. We're on the, conversations about soft life and self-care and all that. And it's like, we're still doing that wrong because we're piling it on top of the, I'm still overworking. I still haven't, but I'm going to take a bath tonight. I still haven't taken a vacation, but, I'm going to acupuncture on Wednesday. We're still doing that. And it's like, no, you actually, to be good at this, have to be okay. Like, you have to actually drink the water, and you have to actually sleep, and you have to actually take the time to work on the relationships that sometimes feel really complicated, in your household or with your family. Because if you don't do that, you are literally pouring from an empty cup, and you're trying to show up and be an ally for who? You don't have anything. But we've been operating with these like stunts and shows. So of course you get, the blue bracelets for, after the election, or you get the black squares, or you get, there's all forms of this. Now we've got people like literally coming out saying like, hey, I'm still here for DEI. And I'm like, since when was an announcement the way to do this? Right. Like, but we're getting that because that is the thing that we have the energy for. We're not thinking about the fact that like we are asking people to run constantly. And now we also have the benefit of social media. So I also have to have a stream of what I am doing so that it's validated. So when you check me out and decide if you're going to hire me or not, you have somewhere you can go and like scroll. So I have to also record myself doing the things. Of course, you're going to get manufactured things. Of course, you're going to get content that's useless. Of course, you're going to get information that's wrong. Everybody's got to make a highlight reel. And so that's where we are. And what I'm trying to do with the work that I'm doing now is help people like understand that like, if we could just get back to like humaning, like being intentional about connection and taking care of ourselves and understanding that I have to fill my cup so that I can show up and make the impact I want. If we can get back to that, then we can do all of the things we'd like to see happen around equity. But if we are not going to do that, all of it is performative and checking the box. And I don't want to do that anymore.
Oh, Amber, so much to dig into there. But yes,
I know my answers are so long and I'm so sorry.
No, I love it.
Your answers are they're
great.
perfectly timed. I'm using perfect very intentionally right now.
Rachel knows that I have a tendency to get long-winded as well. So I'm here for it. And I'm not that's not a pejorative. That's just saying
you were not long-winded.
It takes your brain, you get going and you get thinking. But
we wanted all of the words.
Exactly.
Thank y'all. Y'all are sweet.
Yeah. So if you see me just aggressively nodding while you're talking, just know I'm here with you. But so all of that plus one to everything, lots of places we could go from there. One of the things that was popping into my mind as you were sharing was just that point around, especially for folks who are doing this work, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yep.
Equity work, humaning, DEI, whatever, coaching, whatever it is. As you noted, rightfully so, there was this swell of people who suddenly had an access point into this work because it is work. And that's the thing I wanted to kind of pull out, right? Like it is work. And I think a lot of people don't view it as work.
Oh, yeah.
And that's on both sides. It's both practitioners as well as folks who could benefit from the help of practitioners, right? So what we saw is in the last couple of years, there was suddenly like this opening of the doors and people were like, oh, I'm being not even invited in. I'm being dragged into this conversation because we need to have people who know what they're talking about. And I think what we've started to see pretty quickly and now what we're seeing shaking out, 5 years later at this point is that not everyone had the tools or had done their own work to be equipped to be able to have those discussions or work with others or handle those feelings of guilt and shame or whatever it was, because that was really what it was is, the black square, all the stuff you mentioned, that comes out of a sense of deep, profound guilt.
I gotta do something. Do something. Give me something to do.
Exactly. But also but paired with sometimes either ignorance around what actually is the work to be done or sort of like willful ignorance where you're like, I know I could be doing more, but I don't want to, but I want to showcase that I'm a good person. Yeah. And so I think that, all that is just, again, like I think a lot about how it really is so important for those who are in this work to hold space for themselves, because sometimes it does feel like, oh, I'm just going to take the bath or take the vacation or whatever. It doesn't feel important, but it is really important.
Yeah.
And the tool tools, I think, is a hard one because unlike some of these other industries that are out there that are like really highly regimented or have a lot of, certifications or sort of a process or a history around them, DEI, equity, social justice, it's a huge space and there's a lot of places to work into there. And I think that's also been a challenge for a lot of people because it's like, well, what are the
Mhm.
tools? What work do I have to do with
Right.
myself? And, communication is one thing that comes up a lot, I think, because a lot of the work I think does tie back to how are we actually talking with each other and how are we calling people in or calling them out. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's where you really see that breakdown because there's that defensiveness or people, have a bad discussion where it was
Yeah.
handled poorly. And so I'm just curious, in your experience, I'm sure you've come across a lot of this. And so how have you seen it be helpful to maybe are there signs of like miscommunication where you can sort of like look at it as like a red flag warning? Or
Mm.
are there tools or strategies that you've seen work well when you've been having, conversations or trainings or whatever it might be with folks who are not necessarily equipped yet to be at that point in their journey?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that's really important, and I usually open most of the, courses that I train with this is like, it's work. Like it's actually work. It's, you're going to feel things. There's going to be discomfort. This is not, it is actual labor. And I know feelings, we like to make it seem like they're these little inconvenient things that trickle into our life that we can brush away. But like, this is actual labor. And so most folks, I think, given the way that we live, particularly here in the United States, are missing a lot of tools. We're missing, most of us can't have a tough conversation with our parents. And you would think I'm about to go to work and talk to my boss, the person who cuts my check. Like, how am I going to do that? We don't have the tools. We just don't. And what I do think a lot of equity practitioners could really benefit from is like making sure that those tools are embedded in the way that we do the work. And that hasn't necessarily happened. It's the part I love to focus on. And so to answer your question, when I encounter it, we are going to go through it. But I tell you on the front side, hey, this is hard. You're going to feel hard things. And when I get to certain places where it's tough, I ask, okay, wait, is this discomfort or is your safety at issue? Because if we're having a safety matter, we can address that. We got to focus on that. Let's got to get resolved. But like if you're just uncomfortable, I mean, come on, that's like part of it, And we have deluded ourselves into believing that like we can do all of this like beautifully impactful work around connecting with people and being better to the world and like having inclusion be a part of our workplaces and communities without feeling icky sometimes or uncomfortable sometimes. Let me tell you, I had this moment where I was like, this is a perfect, perfect, perfect example of like how people end up they are. You have put yourself together. You've got everything buttoned up. It is neat and tight. And you show up in the workplace and all of a sudden you are feeling things. Absolutely not. Is the way most folks will react to that. In reality, though, you gotta be prepared to feel the things regardless of if you put yourself together or not. You've gotta have the tools to navigate that regardless. And the moment that really pronounced that for me is I have a godson. I live in Atlanta. I have a godson here. It was his birthday. One of his friends was in crisis. We were concerned about him. We could not find him. He was missing. We are like driving around to all the places trying to figure out where this young man is. And he was sending text messages that were clearly distressful. So we're like super worried, like, wait a minute, where are you? He is fine. Let me not hold anyone in suspense in that way. But in the moment, we're like, what's going on? We end up going to his family home. And remember, it's my god baby's birthday party. So I'm dressed. Okay. I'm nice. I got my nice, fancy, expensive sneakers on. I'm, earrings and jewelry and all that stuff is happening. I'm fancy. And we pull up to this young man's family home, and it is, I mean, completely no grass in the front yard, very much impoverished, no carpet, no, just these are folks that are living in extreme poverty. And I'm standing there in $2,500 sneakers. And I had to literally command myself and remind myself, A, why I am there. All right. Because what happens is we feel guilty and then we shrink and then we just want to throw something at the problem to make it go away. No, I still need to find where this little boy is. And so I, in that moment, had to take a second and go, okay, I am standing deep in my privilege, literally in these folks' lawn that has absolutely no grass. These people, I mean, like if I gave these folks these shoes, you know what I mean? Like it was, I was going through all of that. But what it reminded me of is that the work still exists. I still got to find him. I still got to talk to these police officers. I still need to make the connections. And more importantly, I need to assess really quickly what my role is in this moment. And because of how I was perceived, because I did put myself together that day, because I did have on the quote unquote fancy things, people automatically do what? Assume you're the one in charge. Oh, she's the one. Let me go talk to her. She seemed to have her stuff together. And while that I had this immense guilt around that, I still had a responsibility. And so we have to recognize that part of our humanity is realizing that like whatever you dressed for that day may not be what you encounter. And your obligation and responsibility remains the same. And that's why your cup has to stay full. And it is always work. Sometimes the work is, I need to get out of my own feelings because we got to figure out where this child is. Sometimes the work is, ooh, this is a really tough conversation. But if I don't have the conversation, this person's going to turn around and do this to someone else. Sometimes the work is recognizing that something is going on between two folks and you can step in and interrupt it. And you, at every turn, are going to find yourself a little uncomfortable. And for me, that moment was it, right? Because I could have easily been like, ooh, I don't belong here. Clearly, I look out of place. I don't want anyone to feel bad because I'm like showing up with all this extra fancy dressed up stuff. And these are not those kinds of folks at all. I don't want them to think I'm looking down on them. Ain't nobody thinking about that. We trying to find this little boy. And so we have to do a better job of recognizing that the labor is happening all the time and equip folks from that end. Right. Great. You're in the loop. Get out of the loop. What really needs your attention right now? Where does the work belong? Because there's always work. And that's why we got to take care of ourselves in the process so we can do the work.
Yeah. So funny. I feel it. I'm just reminded of that. Do you remember feel the fear and do it anyway? I feel like
Yes.
that's like what this is like. Feel the feels and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Just, like feel it and go. It's
Yep.
totally I
Yep.
so we've talked about humaning well a little bit, but I want to dig in to these pillars that
Mm-hmm.
you have created. So let's talk through them. Talk through what are these pillars? What is the humaning well? You have a podcast. It is beautifully produced as we
Thank you.
talked prior to this conversation offline. And yeah, what is it all about?
So, humaning well it's a resilience framework. What it's really intended to do is give people a bit of understanding about where we should be focusing so that we are in the best position to be able to support, to thrive, to grow, and this is not, humaning sounds wonderful. Well, oh, we all want that. But this is, it's labor and there are elements to that are really important. And so the four pillars of humaning well are health, wealth, relationships, and growth. Health is all the health. It's your physical health, it's your mental health, it's your emotional health, it's your, like, are you okay stuff, right? So, not just the stuff we go to the doctor for, but absolutely that stuff too. But, it is also just having awareness of like your feels, where are you with that? And are you managing those things effectively? Are you suppressing? What is that suppressing potentially doing to you? By the way, stop suppressing. Women do it a lot. That's why we have all the autoimmune diseases. Take it from someone who knows. But so that's, the health pillar. Then there's the wealth pillar. And wealth isn't just money. It is absolutely thinking about your financial well-being and like your income and like how you're investing and like having an estate plan and thinking about like, the part of your legacy that will go on without you and things like that. But it is also being thoughtful about like some of the resources that we have, like time. Like time is a wealth thing, right? And so, I try to make sure that I embed elements of that in there so that we recognize that wealth is not just money. Like, yes, we live in a capitalist society. We have to, survive and thrive. But time is also a part of that. Having the skills to communicate is also a part of that. And so wealth in a broader sense than just money is the second pillar. The third pillar is relationships because like we all have them, So how are you managing those? Are you speaking up? Are you challenging? Can you give feedback? Do you know how to receive feedback? Like it's the skills of being able to engage with people in relationship, whether those are business relationships or personal relationships or casual encounters out in the world. How are you able to navigate that? And then the last pillar is growth, which is thinking about, how your life moves, so are you open to having, new ideas shared with you? How do you receive those? Are you putting yourself in a position to get new information, to evolve your perspective? Are you putting yourself in a position to have new experiences that you might not otherwise have exposed yourself to? It's literally the things that, go up, into our brains and our bodies that help us to grow, right? Like help me to be a better or different, right? Because sometimes we're different, but not necessarily better, person. And so I identified these 4 pillars when I started to think about like, what do people need? And so I kind of started writing all these things. And, as I was writing them, I was like, okay, I think I see some common themes. And so that's how we ended up with the 4 pillars of humaning well. And it's funny because I don't talk a lot about the 4 pillars because I feel like they're so simple that people are like, oh, yeah, I'm healthy. And like, yeah, I'm doing all right with my finances. And then, oh, yeah, well, shoot, I got some pretty good relationships. And, I'm growing all the time, And so because the words are so simple, I think people kind of see it as like this check the box. And then I also am very cautious about people feeling like, oh, well, where's the quiz so I can see which one I'm low in so I can focus on that? And it's like, humaning well is like literally the opposite of that. What I'm asking you to do is be willing to lean into the work that is going to keep you the fullest so that when it is time for you to show up and support, when it is time for you to be active in your community, when it is time for you to say the brave thing, you are not so mired in your own stuff that you don't do it. I need people who are ready. And I can't be the only one ready. And I know that being ready is work. And so what Humaning Well is asking us to do is like have better boundaries so that like you are not sleepy tomorrow because you stayed up on the phone all night because your friend didn't want to get off. Let's be more responsible about giving feedback. I had to give some tough feedback today. Someone sent me a text message and at some point she's like, I feel like I only reach out to you when I need something. And I was like, and that's true. You do only reach out to me when you need to. And I know that didn't feel good for her to read, but it's true. Let's work that out. I don't want that relationship with you, And so like if we're willing to do that labor, when the big labor comes, whatever it is, right? And I'm hoping, especially in this moment we're in the US, that there is going to be a big moment. But when the big moment comes, whatever discomfort that comes with will not be so individually, like personally deteriorating because we've been doing the work all along. I've been doing what I need to do all along. And so that's really what Humaning Well is about, is like having these perspectives and these 4 pillars in ways that we can be intentional about shoring ourselves up so that we can be the allies, so that we can be the community members we want to be, so that we can have the kind of trajectory and impact that we're looking for without also having to be exhausted, depleted, and overwhelmed in the process.
I will put that energy out there also. Yes.
Yes.
I have a follow-up question for you. As you were talking, first of all, I was thinking about how it's so funny in this particular medium that we're in, this podcast medium that we're in, these health and wellness podcasts are like
Oh
always
my
the number
gosh.
one, right? So, and
Yes.
everyone's always looking for the answer. What's the way for us to be better and
Right.
faster, smarter,
How many
whatever?
mushrooms do I need to eat? How much alcohol not to drink? Wait, let me think. Oh, we need dark
Oh.
chocolate. Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you, and I am guilty as charged for listening to some of that stuff for sure. So I'm like, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I was curious for people who are listening to this, is there, because there are these beautiful pillars, and I see how they're interconnected. But if
Mhm.
someone was like trying to figure out like, well, how do I even start? Like, would you
Mm.
recommend like? I know this isn't should be prescriptive, but, I'm just curious as, like, what
Yeah,
you
I can
would
make a
say.
recommendation.
Great,
You
love
you
it.
the recommendation is to start the place that you're the most uncomfortable.
Oh, I love that.
That's the spot, because
That
I'm gonna
is
tell
it.
you, the feelings thing, oh, y'all are like, "Oh, Amber's so great at empathy." Honey. No, no,
Well,
no.
but that's because you've done your work in the uncomfortable
Now
space.
she is good at it now. But like, I literally this week even, my significant other, he is very much like, yeah, like, he has this saying, he's like, I teach you life, you teach me life, I teach you love, because he is like, where are the feelings, ma'am? Like, what is up? Like, and he tells this story all the time. My first TED Talk, like I mentioned, my father passed away, just before that. And so I had to go and I had to clean his, my father's home and all of that. And my boyfriend was like, are you going to cry? Like, you have not cried. Like, you lost your dad. Like, what is up? Like, you're like doing this mechanical thing? Like, what's going on? And he had said to me, he's like, yeah, I'd already kind of decided that I was going to break up with you because you like didn't have feelings and I couldn't understand
Wow.
it. And then you get to your TED talk and you cry through the whole rehearsal. And he was like, oh,
Wow.
there it is. Okay, we can work this out. So like, yeah, no, that you want to talk about like where to start? It's the place that you struggle. It's
I
the
love
place
that
that,
so
yeah,
much. I'm
that's
gonna
that's
I'm
it.
I'm gonna have my husband listen to this because he's the one. He's so funny. We've been married for 15 years
Woo!
tomorrow.
Congratulations. Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
amazing. Happy
Yeah,
anniversary.
I don't know how we made it, but thank you. And I just like, and then I mentioned the amount of time because I realized sometimes he's really bad at receiving love, And so
Mhm.
I started, I doing this thing now where I'm going, I'm loving you with my hands at you. And he's just like feeling attacked when I did that the first time.
Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Overwhelming.
Oh my
I'm
gosh, this
out.
is so
I
What's
know.
funny.
up?
He was like, "Can we talk about something else now?" And I was like, "I'm
Yeah.
trying to shower you with love."
Yeah.
Anyway, it just reminded me of
That's
that.
where he needs to
So,
start. He needs to start with that. He's got the same thing I had. I was like, we just gonna get it done. I'm gonna feel
yes.
the things, but I can feel in between the getting it done.
Well, I mean, listen, so I don't know, Rachel knows this about me, but I don't know if you're into true crime at all, Amber.
Oh,
I
for
am a
sure.
Great, perfect. All right. So, as you probably know, the
Mhm.
true crime community has evolved a bit over the past couple, decades or so. And one of the big points that comes up a lot is that people grieve in ways that we do not like always understand.
Yep.
And so a lot of times this has been an issue for people who get, like wrongfully accused or judged
Yep.
or whatever, because people are like, oh, they're not grieving or they're not
Yep.
processing their feelings or they're not crying or they're not doing
Yeah.
whatever it is in the right way. So, like,
Right.
kind of a little bit of that mentality with your boyfriend
Yeah.
being like, she's not crying. But
Yeah.
at the
And I
same
don't
time,
so
like,
let me be crystal clear. This is a person who was like there. So he was like, not only is she not crying, like I don't know if she feels it. So like he was also, he had
it was
purview to
more about
like
like
a
the
lot.
deeper, like the
Yeah,
inner
he was
self.
just like,
Okay.
"Hey, do you know your dad passed away? Like, I mean, like, if you got, did you get the memo? Like, what's going? Hey, something should be happening here." And like, there wasn't for him. It was like, yeah, I don't know that I expect you to be in like complete unraveled breakdown, but like, there hasn't been enough of anything.
Mm.
And even when I went back and talked to Becky, the woman that was my father's landlord or landlady, is landlord like inclusive? I don't even know
I
if that's
know.
the
Oh
right.
my goodness.
I don't know if that's
Land person. You
land
can't even
person?
say land doesn't even sound good as
Yeah,
as we're thinking
I'm like,
about
"Wait
it.
a minute,"
Don't
right?
There's
like
Like,
a lot
any
to
of this.
unpack with
yeah,
it
so
for
well,
sure.
but
That
no offense to
person.
no offense to anyone here with my language choice here, but, that person that he leased his apartment from,
Right.
she and I have, stayed in touch, and she said to me probably about a year after, she was like, "Oh, yeah, you were completely numb." It was like, almost like there was nothing. You were nice, you were friendly, you were polite, you were helpful, but, like, if I had run into you in a Walmart and had no idea who you were, I would have had no idea that you lost your father. And, like,
Mm.
there was a disconnect, like, a pointed, like, I can't feel that thing happening, and I did not perceive it that way, but it was not just him. And so, yes, you're right,
Mm.
and let's also make space for what you just said. Everybody does not grieve the same. It is not always going to be tears. It is not going to look the same. You are not going to need the same things, but there should absolutely be something. And I just was like, all right, put it on the calendar. Gotta go. Gotta stay at my dad's
Mm.
house for a week. Need to unpack. Gotta do this. All right, how are we gonna move this thing? Wait, there's furniture here. Like it was very much I need to get this done and out the way so that I can go memorize my talk so I can get my talk done. And then once that's done, maybe I can figure out how I feel about losing my dad.
A
Mm.
lot
And
of
like
Virgo energy.
Do you
eh,
do you feel like
Virgo rising here.
There we
Yes.
go.
Yeah.
yeah, I as someone who works with a Virgo can feel that. No comment. Do you feel like that was more of like a protective measure or like a defensive mechanism in your sort of like emotional body as sort of like a
Mm.
compartmentalizing it? Because you were like, if I allow myself to truly lean into and feel the feelings, maybe that was like too scary for your body to really sort of handle at that point because you had stuff going on and not saying that that's a good or bad thing. I'm just wondering if that was maybe
I
part of it.
don't know. I don't even think it was intentional. Like, I feel like when I go back to, that moment and process, like, I can recant the phone call. Like, this is the way I found out. My phone rings. The gentleman on the other end of the phone goes, "Hey, this is Officer blah, blah, blah from Snohomish County, da, 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 da." And I'm like, I just heard officer. And I was waiting on a call from an officer for something else. I can't remember what it was. And so I was like, "Oh, you're calling about blah, 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 blah." And he goes, No. I said, "Wait, where did you say you were calling from?" So he repeats himself, and when I heard Snohomish County, which is the county my father was in Seattle Metro, I said, "Oh, you're calling to tell me my dad's passed away."
You
And he
said that,
said,
right? You knew right away. Wow.
"Yeah, you're calling to tell me my dad passed away." And he said, yeah, yes, ma'am, I'm calling to let you know that we have, your father, and I just wanted to know if you had any details, because sometimes people have made arrangements or plans or whatever." And so I'm like, "Oh yeah, he did, let me get you this information." It was a business call. It was
Wow.
a business
Mm,
call. There was no, like, nothing. I did not have any of the unraveling. I was not cloudy mentally, outside of the fact that I was like, "Oh my gosh, where do I put this on my calendar?" Was how I responded.
mm.
And my partner, yeah, my boyfriend was like, "Yeah, no, 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 no. That's that right there. Mm-mm. That's
Oh,
that's the wrong way to do that." So I don't know what the right way is exactly, but that's wrong. And so, yeah, it was a very complicated, like, moment there. And literally, and we were new. And so, he
Mhm.
had seen so much of me, but, and he had seen me emote and express in other ways, but, like, this thing happens and he's like, "Oh, is that how you do that? Mm-mm. I don't know if I
wow.
could be with that." And so, yeah, literally, he was like, "Yeah, I would have left you. If you
Wow.
had not cried at Ted, if that had not happened, I would have ended the relationship, because there was nothing. It was
Well, it
Wow.
just,
goes back to your whole point of humaning is because
I
he wanted
wasn't.
to he wanted to see the humanity in you.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was doing all the things. Everything was running perfectly. The systems are clicking, the lights are on, but I was not humaning. And, oh, by the way, I was going to acupuncture once a week. I was, doing Pilates. I was getting, a massage once a month. I would have my quarterly facial. Like, I was doing the stuff, but I was not getting what you should. I would go to acupuncture, and my way of framing it would be like, "Oh my gosh, at least I get to take a nap."
Mm.
That's not what acupuncture is for. It's not how that's supposed to go. So, there's a difference, and he's right. I teach him life, he teaches me love, and so
Mm,
here we are, humaning
beautiful.
well together.
Beautiful.
For
Well,
sure.
let's go back a little bit,
Yeah,
back into the workplace, which I mean, I don't want to say back to because it's all connected, of
it
course.
is.
But, if we go thinking about the work environment, you've had, decades of experience doing this humaning work, mostly for big corporations. And what we're seeing right now, 2025, the workplace is evolving
Mhm,
as we speak
mhm.
aggressively. Power
Yeah,
dynamics are, obviously more and more important than ever. And there's RTO, there's all this stuff happening at the federal level. There's, oligarchs are just abounding in the US, AI. I mean, like, I don't even know, like, there's a billion things out there that
a billion.
impacting the work. And so, how are you seeing, the wildness that is work these days intersecting with this idea of humaning well?
Yeah, I think we have to be intentional about it. I've had a few people. I was at another organization a couple weeks ago, and, a young man asked me, like, "Oh my gosh, like, with all of," and he listed all the same things you did, like, "With all this stuff that's going on, like, how are we supposed to, if we still care about equity, how are we supposed to do this?" And I tell everyone the same thing. If it matters to you, you get it done. Equity exists because people do it. If it matters to you, you do it. And so, yes, this is a weird time. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of, unpredictable, wild things that are going on in the world at this moment. And in the United States for certain, like, driving some of the global nonsense that we're seeing. But everything that we want to happen in this world happens because people do it. And so if you want it, you got to do it. And that means, what does it look like for you? When you look at your position in your organization, you sit in, I don't know, logistics. Are you taking the moment to say, as I'm taking a look at the way that I do this process, it might be a bit more equitable if we. Who is going to sit on your shoulder and be like, no, don't do that? Like, no one's doing that. Like, no one has the bandwidth for that. And so, like, I think the thing that we have to remember at all times is that we get a say. We get a say. Now, where we go wrong is when we are so depleted, so burnt out, so overworked, so stretched, tired, etc., that we don't have the energy to have a say. I'm just trying to make it through the day. I'm going to do the process the way the process was told to me. So I'm just adhering to the guidelines. What I'm asking people to do with humaning well is to be willing to say, I want to be well enough that I can be a critical thinker in the places that it matters. I want to be well enough that I can notice the places that I can push just a little bit and make a bit of a change, because whatever the world is doing, it has a lot to do with what the people are doing. And if the people want to feel better, and we can help them feel better, and then we can help them understand that by feeling better, they can make a better impact. And by the way, this is a little uncomfortable, but you're uncomfortable anyway. We might end up on the path that we would all prefer. And so I just, I could be wrong. I hope not, but, I just really feel like, yes, the world is changing. Yes, it's different. Yes, it's weird. Things are very unusual, and we are dealing with things that we have never had to deal with before. But at the end of the day, what the people do and how the people behave is what drives everything.
Yeah.
So how do you want that to look for you? And folks are like, oh, but the laws and the rules. And I'm like, good people break bad laws. That's history. Okay, it's been happening forever. So, like, let's do the thing. No, we do not have the manpower, bandwidth, or capacity to sit on everyone's shoulder and say, nope, don't do that. That is too close to being woke. It's not happening. So, like, at some point, what does it look like for you to bring it to life? You might not be the one that can organize the march or whatever it is, right? Like, that might not be your role. But if you are sitting in, I don't know, talent acquisition, you can be intentional about what a slate of talent looks like. And no one's going to sit on your shoulder and be like, no, too many Asian folks made it into the, like, it's not happening. No one can do that. So we just have to make the commitment that we are unwilling to be bound by the information that we're being given, and instead exist in the reality that is around us. But we have to be well enough to have the bandwidth to do so.
I hope that you are right.
I hope so too. I
hope so
too. Can we spread the word though? Because I also feel like, how do we get the people to know? And people are like, why are you telling people this and it's for free? And I'm like, because I just want people to know.
It's important, especially in this era of, like, of being in advance and, like, compliance and not.
And that preemptively, like, giving away the farm. And I'm like, wait a minute, we need those cows.
It's so true. And it's so hard because, it's what's the only blessing of all of this, what some of my people like to say mishigas is like, they're making it very obvious as to what is going on here. And so that's cool. So there is this, Felicia and I certainly have been talking about this a lot, power dynamic, right? So we're seeing it, but what they're doing is, and what they've been effective at so far, I mean, granted, I still can't believe it's like, it's been like less than 2 months. And we're exhausted. Right? Like, this is exhausting, and it is intentional that it is exhausting. So it's like the spheres of influence, which you are talking about, is like, what can we do within our own ability, knowing that we have to still operate in these broken systems until we can actually change them. Yes.
The first thing you can do is decide to stop being exhausted. You get a say in that. You get a say in your exhaustion. If the news is kicking your ass, turn it off. You can't fix it.
So I do have a quick question on this point for both of you, actually, because I hear you. I agree to a certain extent.
Right.
But I'll give you an example. So I don't even know what day it is, because who knows what's happening with time these days. But I guess it was last week sometime. I was like, okay, it's been a lot. I'm not going to look at the news. Maybe I was traveling. I don't remember. But I was like, no news today. And that happened to be the day that Trump and Vance, like, yelled at Zelensky in the White House. And I feel like that was like a big news day. And then I felt very out of the loop later. So then I felt to the point of our discussion today, guilt that I didn't know this had happened.
Mhm.
And then also to the point of what we talked about, I was like, oh, like, should I say something on the internet? And like, are people judging me because I'm not posting on LinkedIn or
Right.
Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is? And so, like, how do we sort of like balance out having to put boundaries in place for our mental and physical and emotional well-being and not, I guess, like, or does it matter if we like lose a point that happens
Who
that's
who
newsworthy
do
or
you
whatever?
who do you owe posts to? Who do you owe posting to?
I love this
Good
question for you,
I mean,
Felicia.
question.
seriously,
'Cause
who do you owe it
Well,
to?
we talk about this
well,
a lot.
we do talk about this a lot. So I would say, really, at the heart of it, nobody.
Okay. All right. So let's
but
let's hold on to that.
but
Now do we feel
But
the
there are other
pressure?
levels too. There are other levels
Right.
because one of my roles is beyond doing this work is I am also a city councilor. So I do feel like
Yeah.
I owe my constituents,
But
they
that's your
should
job.
know what I
But that's
think.
your job.
That's my job or a
Okay.
job,
That's your job. But we're
we
talking
call it a
about
side
who do
hustle.
you, right, in terms of your consumption of news, owe posts to? The answer is kind of like nobody, right?
Mm,
Okay. Who is asking you if you know all the news?
no one, although
Okay.
Rachel probably.
No, I am
Rachel's
not.
always no, I'm just not to call it.
No,
I'm just like, but you're
but
like,
we
"Have you seen what happened?" Which is not a like,
But
"Oh
that's
my
no.
not
god,
like
I
real
can't believe you
pressure,
didn't see
right?
that." It's not
But
real
no,
pressure.
that's literally like, "Oh my god, I had no idea that this happened. Did you know that like weeks ago?" And I was
I
like, "Did
know,
you
I know.
know?"
Okay. Was there something that you could have done about what happened with Zelensky?
No, this is such good therapy because this is it, right? It's like these feelings of guilt. Like, oh, me personally, sitting in Western Massachusetts, if I only had tweeted out or threaded out, whatever
Would
the
have
word
changed
is,
everything.
it would have changed
Oh my
everything.
gosh. World would be
Guys,
totally different.
FYI, we're in this mess because I didn't post on the internet
Well,
when this
and
happened.
And if we're talking about this from a purely capitalist lens, right? We're like,
Yeah.
oh, we have to post because this is impacting our job. I will also say that many of our lovely other folks that are in this space post absolutely nothing and they have lots of clients. So I don't think that that is something that is a one-to-one. So I
I
Yeah.
also
personally,
want to add,
Mhm.
let's continue to blow this out. Okay, so
Let's
we're
do it.
clear
Here
that
for it.
like,
I had therapy this morning personally, so now it's business therapy.
I
I'm
mean,
here
so
for it.
here we are. Okay.
Podcast therapy.
So like no one's pressuring you to post. It's not like super critical business essential. The world will not fall apart. No one is expecting you to know all the news, like on the top of the news. Nothing you could have done, with the Zelensky situation. All right. So we're all clear on those. All right. Now the opposite is now all of the time that you did not use doing those things, what would you have been better to serve yourself doing?
Oh,
Like, would you have
word.
been better if you were arrested? Would you have been a better parent? Would you have been a better spouse? Would you have been a better friend? Would you have been a better, right? Like, if you had actually decided, yo, I'm going to not only not take a news day, I am going to make sure that I have the most fantastic, I don't know, massage. I'm going to intentionally go to Pilates and like focus on what it is that's happening. I'm going to remember the playlist because they always have the
Mm.
best playlist at Pilates and I never remember what they played. Okay, so like I'm gonna focus on trying to remember the playlist at Pilates. How would that have served you?
Oh, that would have been so good to fill up the cup, to your point. Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
cup matters.
It
So
matters.
if we know good and well that the constant barrage of is intended to make you feel guilty, you get to opt out. I am not participating in the energy exchange anymore. I'm
Mm.
not. When I hit the wall and I've had enough and I know enough, I am going to remove myself and I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure that my cup is full. Because if the fight was tomorrow, I would like to not be tired.
Mic drop.
Oh, yeah, I'm like, I gotta write
Well,
that down and
Amber,
put
it's been
that in
great
my
talking with you.
and scene.
Amazing.
We
I love
have to
this.
seriously remember
Yeah.
that we get a say. Like
Yeah.
that's like the thing that I'm really trying to get Humaning Well to get, people to see is that like you get a say in your own experience. And there is a reason there are so many mechanisms put in place with the intention of trying to extract your ideas, your perspective, your attention, your energy. It is for a reason. And
Mm,
if you would like to resist, the best resistance you can do is make sure that you're good first.
I love
That's
that.
not to say you can't be concerned about that stuff, but make sure you're good first.
Well, and
yeah.
also I think, as far as like feeding the machine and producing content and whatever, like I think and I struggle with this too. We write a lot of blog posts because we want to feed the machine, and it's been shown to be helpful for us for that. So that's good. But also like, maybe do less, but then what we do is higher quality.
Absolutely. Listen, the post that I write when I wake up at 6:30 and I'm like, are the posts that get like 500, 600, 700 likes or like
Amazing.
2,000 shares or like all of that. The posts that we schedule intentionally and like purposely like curate are like 22 likes. And so like,
Incredible.
honestly, you are better when you are passionate, when you have the bandwidth and capacity to show up in your humanness. So like,
I love
lean that way.
Love it.
Yeah,
Even if
that's
it's
such a good
fewer.
reminder.
All
Yeah.
right. This is great. This was amazing. Thank you for the work therapy, life therapy. That was
Everybody
super
keeps asking
helpful.
me if I'm a therapist. I'm like, no, I just realized
but
that
I
there's
feel
a
like
better way to do this.
a lot of this work, I feel like basically is essentially like, I call it business therapy because,
Yeah.
that's part of the work, right? It's like accessing those feelings. And
Yeah.
especially in work environments where I think you mentioned this earlier, like we're taught not to express emotion or
Mm-hmm.
cry at work or any of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? And so the work of a practitioner is to draw that out, which is very much like a therapist. So.
Yeah.
That's true. Thank you so much, Amber. So final, I know that Humaning Well is like top of list for you, but are there any other sort of projects or ideas or movements that are giving you energy that are exciting you right now that you want to share?
Oh, I do have a friend. Her name is Amanda Miller Littlejohn. She released a book called The Rest Revolution, and it has been a fantastic balm for me. So I do recommend her book. But otherwise, yeah, I think, tune into my podcast, the Humaning Well podcast. It's every week on Wednesdays. And you can catch it anywhere podcasts are. And I don't know when this episode comes out, but I am doing a learning series in March of 2025. So if you want to sign up and just kind of get a sense of like what Humaning Well is about and get some tools, I'm doing something every Thursday in March. It's free. I try to give as much away as I can because I need us to be ready.
Yes.
So if you want to sign up for that, that's available as well.
Amazing. I think we did it.
I think
We did it!
did. Yeah.
Yay! Thank you so much, Amber.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Woo. All right, we did it. I got some free therapy out of this. It was great. We really hope that you enjoyed listening to our interview with Amber as much as we enjoyed our conversation with her.
Yeah, I really appreciated all the Virgo energy in that conversation as well. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe. It makes a huge difference in the reach of this podcast and by extension, this work. And visit us on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn to stay up to date on all things Inclusion Geeks. And please stay geeky.
Bye.